The gates open to Cedar Point Saturday morning. The park is one of the most popular in the nation and a regional treasure. For many, Saturday's opening marks the unofficial arrival of summer.
But over the past several months, our 11 Investigates team has looked into a disturbing side of this amusement park: sexual violence against employees by other employees. We believe it is such an important story that we will reveal it throughout this entire week. And we do want to warn you, this story does contain graphic accounts of sexual abuse.
Cedar Point, America's roller coaster. Rides, good times, sunshine. But there's a darker side and a lot of secrets. 11 Investigates has learned that over the past 5 years, the Sandusky Police Department has investigated 27 sexual assault allegations here at the Cedar Point Employee Housing Unit, 10 in the last year alone.
And in talking to some of the women, their stories have disturbing similarities.
I woke up to him inside of me, and I pushed him away, and I just got up and I just left. And then I told my mom, I called my mom, and I was like, this is like Mother's Day. Like, she shouldn't be able to get this call on Mother's Day. Like, her only daughter.
My sweater shawl thing was on the floor with my shirt, and I didn't know where my pants were. And I woke up and there was a condom stuck to my leg.
I had my door unlocked to go back and forth in the bathroom getting ready for bed, and I was taking out my contacts, and he just walked in, like, unannounced, and like, he grabbed me and pushed me up against the bed.
32 men are listed as suspects by Sandusky police in the 27 sexual assault reports. We don't know what many of the suspects look like. That's because they've never been arrested or charged with a crime. Of the 3 men charged with a crime, one name stands out: Donnell Folks. He's in prison for sexual battery. Alexander Jacobson is charged with sexual imposition and still awaiting trial for an incident that took place in 2018. The alleged assaults have taken place in a series of employee dorms and apartments near downtown Sandusky. Those units did not receive positive reviews from most people we interviewed.
We went back to the dorm and realized that, like, we can't, like, unpack anything because the place was just dirty. They had, like, spiders everywhere in the corners. They had, like, cobwebs all over.
There's a lot of drugs. There's a lot of alcohol.
And multiple people told us that there's little security. Now, we wanted to talk to Cedar Point officials and the Cedar Point police chief, but our request for an interview was declined. We told a spokesman that we wanted to talk about numerous sexual assault reports, but we're told that there is no interview availability. The fact is, we simply don't know the true number of sexual assaults inside the Cedar Point employee housing units.
Cedar Point police have not turned over any of its incident reports, arguing it's a private force and not subject to records law.
But 11 Investigates is fighting for those records, believing that there may be more than those 27 assault allegations. Again, all that we know about are the incidents in which a victim went to Sandusky police or when Cedar Point called for assistance.
Do you have any females on?
For Perkins, why?
We got a sexual harassment complaint. Need a female. If not, we definitely need an officer.
Get your body cam.
Sandusky Police Chief Jared Oliver said his officers investigate every single complaint they receive, but he admitted that he has no way of knowing if Cedar Point police are reporting every incident.
If we are called, I say if, we may or may not be called. But if we are called and we go to the scene, then we take over the scene. If there's an arrest that needs to be made, our officers make that arrest. If there's a report that needs to be handled, all officers take care of that report. I can't speak if we're called to every call.
Now, tomorrow night, we're going to tell you more about the alleged victims and tell you about one former Cedar Point employee who was accused of assaulting coworkers during 2 different seasons.
I was too scared to even, like, leave my apartment to, like, tell anybody, so I just stayed in my apartment and just called 911.
Tonight, we continue our investigation into alleged sexual assaults happening at Cedar Point employee housing. We've uncovered 27 reports of assaults over the last 5 years.
One survivor now telling WTOL 11 that she believes the man who raped her should never have even been allowed to work at the park. Each sexual assault survivor has their own story and their own trauma.
But some women who worked at Cedar Point tell Kaylee Marintet they have something in common.
Casey Wilson was 19 when Cedar Point hired her.
I moved there on a Friday because I lived 3 hours away.
It was a chance to test out the real world away from home, living at Cedar Point's employee housing. Not knowing many people, she quickly made a friend named Donnell Folks.
He asked me if I had a Snapchat, and I said, yeah, I do. So he added me on Snapchat, and that's how we communicated.
She says she got some dinner and went over to his place Sunday afternoon, and they started watching a show.
So I ended up falling asleep, and then I'm like a heavy sleeper. Like I don't wake up to alarm clocks. I don't wake up to anything, and I woke up to him inside of me, and I pushed him away, and I just got up and I just left, and I didn't know what to do.
Her trust now blurred as she tried to piece together what had just happened.
I wanted to be away and do something for me for once and enjoy something for me.
Her family came and packed her things before she even worked a single day at Cedar Point. Before she left Sandusky, she went to the hospital and got a sexual assault nurse examination done, also known as a SANE kit. The kit showed Folks' DNA, according to police records. But there was something in that hospital room that haunted Casey.
The one nurse that was doing my kit was like, she was like, wow, you're the first this year that's happened. Like saying like, I'm the first girl from Cedar Point this year. And I was like, it just made me in my head like thinking like, and how much it happens to like girls.
How much this happens to girls, let alone how many girls say Folks was their attacker. Police records show 3 women, including Casey, accused Folks of rape. The first comes from Toledo in 2017. Folks wasn't charged in that case, but his DNA was taken, which is why he was already in the system when police got the other 2 rape reports. The second was reported in 2018 at Cedar Point employee housing, just like Casey's story.
I just don't think Cedar Point really does like a good job. Like, yes, they do a background check, but I feel like they need the workers, so they will hire anybody. They just care about the money and not the people.
Casey says Cedar Point hired Folks again in 2019, and that's when she became the 3rd victim. Folks is in prison for sexual battery in Casey's case after being convicted of that charge. He was also indicted for sexual battery in the 2018 case, but the charge was eventually dismissed. Casey wants to know why Cedar Point allowed Donnell Folks back as an employee after the rape accusations in Toledo in 2017 and then 2018 at Cedar Point housing.
After this happened to me, I got nothing from Cedar Point. I got nothing from my managers, nothing.
A place she once loved, now a place she can't physically bring herself to visit.
I still have issues with trusting people. I do go out, but it's only with like 2 friends. Anything else, I just stick with my parents and I just stick home, and that's just basically what I do now. Like, I just don't want to do much anymore.
Going back to Casey's point, how much this happens to girls. How many girls are sexually assaulted at Cedar Point's employee housing? Sandusky police gave us 27 alleged sexual assault reports from the employee housing facilities in the last 5 seasons at Cedar Point. But since Cedar Point police won't turn over its records, we don't know the true number of reports.
But it's not just Casey. We've heard from 2 other sexual assault survivors, both former Cedar Point employees. They and other former workers are adamant that there's more assaults than we know about.
This is Raven Jones and Elle. Both worked at Cedar Point. both allegedly raped in Cedar Point employee housing facilities.
My sweater shawl thing was on the floor with my shirt, and I didn't know where my pants were. And I woke up and there was a condom stuck to my leg.
Elle says her alleged rapist just barged into her room.
I had my door unlocked to go back and forth in the bathroom getting ready for bed, and I was taking out my contacts, and he just walked in, like, unannounced, and like he grabbed me and pushed me up against the bed, and he like shoved this vape in my mouth.
3 women with different stories and a dark similarity. Raven says Cedar Point didn't offer her much support besides an unpaid leave of absence. Elle, on the other hand, says she and her dad, Jeff, were contacted constantly.
Yes, Mr. Harwood, this is Justin Harris. I'm National Counsel for Cedar Point.
Elle says that officials with the park tried to offer her compensation. She filed a lawsuit against Cedar Point. No matter how Cedar Point has handled cases in the past, there's an agreement that there's a need for change in the future.
They need more security.
No one should ever have to go to their job and think that they might be a rape that day.
They're allowing it. It's extremely disturbing and unsettling.
Cedar Point officials did give us a statement saying the safety of our guests and associates is always our top priority. Through a variety of methods, our on-site housing is monitored 24/7. They went on to say Cedar Point takes these matters very seriously. All reports of associate misconduct are immediately responded to, reviewed, and if appropriate, escalated to local law enforcement for further investigation. The full statement is on WTOL.com, but we are still working with Cedar Point leadership to sit down with us. Tomorrow at 11, we sit down with advocates for victims of sexual assault who talk about why survivors don't always come forward and why some have never come forward.
Over the last 2 nights, we have told you about numerous sexual assault reports at Cedar Point that our 11 Investigates team uncovered.
Those allegations have been made during the past 5 years by Cedar Point employees, and only 2 men have been found guilty of any charges at this point. But why? Tonight, our team brings you some of those answers.
I woke up to him inside of me, and I pushed him away, and I just got up and I just left.
I didn't know where my pants were, and I woke up and there was a condom stuck to my leg.
He just walked in, like, unannounced, and like he grabbed me and pushed me up against the bed.
Over the past 2 nights, we've introduced you to Casey, Raven, and Elle. They are 3 of the 27 Cedar Point workers who say they've been sexually assaulted in employee housing during the past 5 seasons. They continue to push police for justice, but 11 Investigates has learned that 15 other workers have asked police to close their cases. And that's not unusual, according to Sandra Miller, president and CEO of Cleveland Rape Crisis Center. She says only 1/3 of victims come forward.
What survivors tell us is they are afraid. And they're afraid of retaliation from their perpetrator. They are afraid that they won't be believed by the people whom they tell.
Those were fears that Casey had to tamp down in her own mind after she was assaulted by a coworker while she was sleeping in 2019.
I was like, I'm just not gonna tell anybody. Like I don't want to tell anybody because like I know what girls go through. I know that they get like threats and they get like people be like, oh, it's not true.
Nicole Badera, a sociologist who's done extensive research in dorm violence, was asked about the 27 sexual assault reports at Cedar Point.
We are talking about young people, some of whom are looking to have this very carefree, perhaps this summer full of sexual conquests. And then there's drugs and alcohol, which makes it really easy to blame victims if something does take place.
She says it's a perfect storm.
There are a lot of reasons you would expect sexual assault in this setting to be covered up, including victims being afraid of losing their jobs, which are tied to their housing.
I was afraid I was going to get fired because, they had rules. You weren't supposed to be in people's dorms. So I was like, oh my gosh, I'm going to lose my job over this. I was terrified.
Miller says another hurdle for victims is simply the time that it takes to prosecute a case, being traumatized over and over by having to relive the event.
We know that 2/3 of sexual assaults are never reported, and then those that are reported to formal authorities like police or child welfare agencies, only a small percentage of those get past the investigation and get passed on to prosecution.
It often takes a significant amount of time, she says. A record search supports Miller's point. In one of the Cedar Point cases, Alexander Jacobson was charged with sexual imposition in August of 2018. His case is scheduled for trial later this month, nearly 4 years after the alleged incident. Now, at least 4 women have told 11 Investigates that they've received little support from Cedar Point after reporting sexual assaults.
After this happened to me, I got nothing from Cedar Point. I got nothing from my managers, nothing. Like, Cedar Point did not contact me at all. Nothing about their uniforms and nothing.
So they didn't even reach out to you?
Nope.
Not once?
Nope.
And according to Badera, lack of support discourages people from reporting incidents and can re-traumatize those victims.
There's this phenomenon called institutional betrayal, where if a survivor is betrayed by an institution they trusted when they tried to come forward and get help in the aftermath of a sexual assault, if that happens, that trauma is the same as being sexually assaulted a second time.
In a statement, Cedar Point said, in part, that our team is available to assist associates at any time with multiple resources. It said that an emergency texting program, a hotline, and counseling are available to associates. Park officials, however, continue to refuse to sit down and answer our questions. Miller has a message for all the women and men who might be afraid to come forward.
It doesn't matter what you did, what you wore, how much you had to drink. Nobody had a right to violate you in this way. You did not deserve to be sexually assaulted because you went out for a night, you enjoyed yourself with friends, you went to a party.
Cedar Point officials did give us a statement reading in part, Cedar Point takes these matters very seriously. All reports of associate misconduct are immediately responded to, reviewed, and if appropriate, escalated to local law enforcement for further investigation. The full statement is on WTOL.com right now. Our investigation continues through the end of the week right here on WTOL 11 at 11. Now, we do have resources for sexual assault victims available. Just text the word HELP to 419-248-1100 and we will send that information right to your phone. We will also send you our entire investigation plus a link to contact us if you have been victimized while working at Cedar Point.
They were more worried about the staffing inside the park than they were the well-being of their associates and who we were bringing in.
We did warn them constantly about the repercussions of allowing whoever, whenever to come into the park. We knew what was going to happen.
I wish Cedar Point could have seen this coming because we sure did.
3 different women, 3 women with the same stories. Former members of the Cedar Point Human Resources Department, employees responsible for hiring thousands of others to staff the amusement park. Each asked that we hide their identities, fearing they would be criticized by the community for speaking out.
It was basically just, if they pick up the phone, you were, supposed to hire them. It didn't matter if they gave you a crap interview or not.
Last week, 11 Investigates told you that we uncovered 27 sexual assault allegations from 2017 to 2021. Those incidents allegedly took place inside the employee dorms. 2 of the cases resulted in sexual battery charges and 1 in a sexual imposition charge. One of the years in those reports sticks out, 2021. There were 10 reports filed that year, including 7 allegations of rape, more than any other season. 2021 was a difficult year for Cedar Point. Coming off the pandemic, the park had trouble finding employees. It was so bad that the park closed for 2 days a week during the entire month of June. The 3 women worked previous years in other departments, but spent just 1 year in HR. But they agreed that life changed in human resources as summer neared. The 6 to 10 recruiters could no longer take 30 minutes for an interview.
Some people would hire 50 people a day.
By the summer of 2021, the women say they were told to hire at least 25 workers a day, and some of those workers would start the same day.
If it were a normal season where our staffing, isn't, so desperate, half the people I hired, I probably wouldn't have hired. But if we didn't hire these people, we would get reprimanded, we would get yelled at.
Besides an increase in hiring volume, something else changed, the women said. A new employee could start before a background check came back.
We would take them, these candidates, behind the counter, where we're working, and they would just, ask them if they've had any, convictions or open cases or anything like that. And, of course, most of the time, these people are going to be like, no, I have nothing. They're not going to be like, yeah, I have assault charge on me.
But sometimes they did have a record.
Unfortunately, we were informed that there was an individual who told the VP that they didn't have anything on their background check. They were completely clear. They got to work in the park, and there was about 8 convictions.
All 3 of the women verified the same story about that new hire, who was then later fired.
I just remember everyone in the recruiting center, our jaw just dropped. Did we really just allow someone to work in the park?
None of the women are working for Cedar Point any longer. They did, however, provide us with verification that they worked in HR last year. Besides hiring policies, they say they're frustrated by what they say was a dangerous culture in the employee dorms.
It was very common for associates to come into the recruiting center and quit because of the housing conditions, whether that was the alcohol, the drugs, being assaulted, sexually or not. It was a very violent atmosphere most of the time.
When they brought the issue to upper management, the women told of the same response.
We were like, we're going to get all these people in here that could be a danger issue. When we expressed that concern, they were like, that's not yours to worry about.
Yeah, this is one of the things we're hoping to see from our investigation. Why? Because the Cedar Point Police Department was refusing to turn over any records. Now that Sandusky is controlling those records, we know that we will be getting them. In its statement, the city said, in part, the policing authorities of the Cedar Point Police Department will be fully transitioned into the Sandusky Police Department's operation, and the Cedar Point Police Department will focus solely on security operations at Cedar Point and its local affiliated properties. Conversely, the Sandusky Police Department will assume all policing responsibilities for Cedar Point and its affiliated properties. Now, next week, we're going to be sitting down with the Sandusky Police Chief and also the city manager to get more details. And of course, we encourage victims to reach out to us at 11investigates@WTUL.com. Reporting in studio, this is Brian Duggar for WTUL 11 on Fox 36.